Hello, friends. We are beginning our work on the 21st program. I guess so far we have over 30 hours of programming into it, 20 programs so far, of preparatory material to study the Egoic Lotus carefully in a synthetic manner. Now, whereas this is kind of a work in progress, so whereas I thought I was going to begin immediately petal by petal, what I decided to do instead was to work, let's see, yes, right here, was to work on the large sections, which are called qualities of petals of the Egoic Lotus in detail. It's really only 13 pages in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, but it's such an important 13 pages, and I thought I would simply incorporate this material into the study of the petals per se, but I think it's much better to go with what the Tibetan has said in a very coherent and precise manner. And then to do the same thing for the study of the colors, and only then begin this more synthetic work. The synthetic work will be in two phases. First, we will have the study of petal by petal, bringing many things together in relation to each petal, and of course to the tiers that are involved. And then we will begin to look at some, as a final piece of work for us, we'll begin to look at some charts where we can see the these many factors listed side by side. I think that will be our final useful event. This will maybe take, a little bit longer. Things will be a little bit more expanded than I thought, but I thought when I looked over this material from 536 and 549, although I have written on it, I have the feeling that people are much more likely to assimilate in this manner, which is more taught, more spoken, than simply to be directed to these pages of commentary and hope that by themselves they will gather what is necessary. Of course, they can do that, but this I will add to what I've already put into this commentary on these 13 pages as new ideas come to me, because this was written 7 years ago. Maybe some new ideas have come. And I'll do this with this second important section on the colors as well, and then I think we will be ready to proceed petal by petal and then work on the final charts, which are laid out in tabular form, with the subjects simplified and many subjects adjacent to each other so that they can be seen under the eye. So here again is our picture, that which we are referring to with the higher three planes of the mental plane, and this particular Egoic Lotus is on the point of its final destruction. It's a fully opened lotus, of course. It's static, and we cannot see the blaze of glory that DK says is there to be found in all of the rotation and scintillating movement and this amazing synthesis in color and sound of the light of the life process. But even with this static form, we can at least, in a fairly fifth-ray manner, identify the different features and the different associations to be made. We're working more in the field now of knowledge than of synthesis per se, but at least it's a place to start. Okay, so we're on page 536, and this section is actually called the Egoic Lotus. It goes on for about 13 pages in Cosmic Fire, and this is really a subject of the utmost psycho-spiritual importance, and we can learn so much about our development as human beings and disciples by studying the Egoic Lotus, perhaps in a way more than in any other way. We actually begin with a footnote. In the Cosmic Fire, DK has many footnotes embedded, and sometimes when people read the book, they do not really pay enough attention to the footnotes. Of course, there is a bit of a complication because so much that is footnoted relates to a third edition of The Secret Doctrine, which has been out of print for a long time and is difficult to acquire. I managed to acquire it, but, well, you know, it's in storage. What can I say? Excuse me. Okay, so the Egoic Lotus. The laws of karma are adjusted. The clue being found in the mastery of the 16 rays of the ego. Yes, for which 16 rays mantras or words are given. The real pronunciation, however, being reserved for initiates only. The exact pronunciation of the invocative word is so powerful. This, says the Tibetan, is from the Kali Upanishad. So we don't know at the moment the method by which the 16 rays have been, should we say, derived from in the Upanishads, but in our own teaching we can find ways to support this numbering. And so let's look at a way to look at the 16 rays of the ego. Notice the 1 and 6 are 7. We're talking about that which in its entirety manifests the human being in form, the 7 being the number of particularized manifestation, and 3 the number of generalized manifestation. At least I see it that way. If we number the 16 parts of the Egoic Lotus, we can arrive at the number 16 in this way. I mean, if we number the parts. So there is 1 jewel in the lotus, 3 synthesizing petals, 3 sacrifice petals, 3 love petals, 3 knowledge petals, and the 3 constituents of the atomic triangle, which will be the mental unit, the astral permanent atom, and the physical permanent atom. So we can see a 16 there, 3 5s, and the jewel in the lotus. There's so many different ways to count, and each one of these ways is significant. So from the number 16, it is what you look for numerical similarities. And when you find numerical similarities, you realize there's going to be a connection. So from the number 16, it is clear that the Egoic Lotus is associated with the throat center. Think of the 16 petals of the throat center and the number 16 of the Egoic Lotus. Of course, we can also do this by thinking of the not just the number 16 of the Egoic Lotus, but of its 12 petals, and in which case we would relate the 12 petals to the heart center. And it's clear that the Egoic Lotus is a heart center. We call it the heart center of the monad. So using the 12 petals of the Egoic Lotus, we can relate it to the heart center and the heart in the head center, both of which have 12. And also to the what's called the higher 12, which are the monadic 12. So there are yogic mantras. There are. We've seen that in the way the Hindus display the different chakras with different Sanskrit letters in each one of the petals of the chakras. There are yogic mantras for the 16 petals of the throat center, and we can wonder whether there would be a relation to the 16 rays of the ego and their respective well, maybe we'll just say mantrams. You know, maybe mantra is the plural, but it also seems to be the... It's possible that mantram is the singular, mantrams is a kind of a plural. Mantra can be a plural, but since it's not much used that way, we'll just use it this way. So maybe there is a relation. The number 16 is a 7, and we know even that there's a point at which the throat center is ruled by the 7th ray. This happens when the initiation process starts, maybe even at the first initiation, when we have the sacral center ruled by Uranus rising to the throat, which then begins to be ruled in part by Uranus, the dispenser of the 7th ray, and the use of speech becomes more magical. So we know how important the Egoic Lotus is in the whole question of manifestation. It is important in the act of manifestation because it sums to 7, and 7 is really the number of embodiment. Words are produced through the throat center, and the word, which we are told issues from the soul is the word. So the Egoic Lotus is associated with the word. The word issues from the soul aspect, of which the 16-fold Egoic Lotus is for man the representative. Whether we have that kind of numbering for all higher beings, one doesn't know, but there seems to be a certain consistency about it. So in the Egoic Lotus, all the three aspects are represented. We say the jewel and the lotus, first aspect, the petals of the Egoic Lotus, the second aspect, and the atomic triangle, the third aspect. That's one way to do it. Sometimes the synthesis petals are included with the jewel and the lotus as the central unit, and altogether they represent the first aspect, and then the 9 petals represent the second, and the atomic triangle the third. And there are ways to divide the petals, we know, so that the 9 petals, so they represent the 3 aspects, sacrifice, love, and knowledge, 1, 2, 3. But in general, we have the second aspect represented in the Egoic Lotus because the lotus is the vehicle for the middle principle, the soul principle, the consciousness aspect. The third aspect is represented by its connection to the throat center and by its connection to the mental plane and the 5th ray, the third aspect within the Egoic Lotus. Maybe we could say the first aspect is represented because it's in charge. You know, it's the vehicle for the solar angel. First aspect is represented because our personality life is controlled from the lotus through which the solar angel slash angel of the presence works. So the knowledge petals represent the third sub-aspect of this second aspect, and the sacrifice petals the first sub-aspect of the second aspect. These are thoughts gathered in relation to the aspects and the egoic lotus. It is our superior. The solar angel is the superior, and even though the egoic lotus represents a blend of what we are as the monad with a blend of the presence of the solar angel as the angel of the presence, it represents a superior force, a dominating force. The word dominate is important in music. It relates to the dominant, which is the fifth in the scale, and the soul, the egoic lotus, is associated with this fifth. The monad is the tonic, and maybe the tonic an octave higher. So 5 is a potent number of manas, and we shall find this number also represented in the egoic lotus, revealing its monastic function. It's a function of love and mind. It's so much like Venus in that respect, like Venus, a combination of love and mind, of Ray 2 and Ray 5. So this 5 appears, if we count in the following way. We have already enumerated a kind of 16, have we not? But if we want to look at the 5-ness of the egoic lotus, we will see that the 3 constituents of the atomic triangle can be considered as one. 3 as 1, a familiar thought in occultism. The 3 knowledge petals is 1, the 3 love petals is 1, the 3 sacrifice petals is 1. And the central bud of 3 synthesizing petals and the jewel in the lotus, as I said, they are often considered as a unit. The 3 and the 1 as a unit. And then you just add these together and you get your 5. The 5th ray, with its esoteric color, indigo, is so important in relation to the egoic lotus. And there's a definite connection between the indigo, Venus, and the egoic lotus. And you notice how that indigo connects both the great second ray, the synthetic ray, with ray 5, whose esoteric color is indigo, we are told. So if we wish to consider the egoic lotus with the number 6 as the form producer, we shall simply consider the 3 synthesizing petals as 1, and the jewel in the lotus as yet another 1. So the atomic triangle is 1. Each of the 3 normal 9 petals is tiers is 1. That's 4. The love tier is another 1. That's 5, and the jewel in the lotus is the 6. And there, because it would represent the 6, it would be a representation of the monad, whose number is in a way 6, just the way the number of Shambhala is 6 when you reduce the number 24. We can also find, I guess I'm counting out here the ways we can enumerate the egoic lotus. The number 22 can also emerge. How do we find this? 22, of course, 22 is a master number, a master number, along with 33, 44, maybe 55, I'm not sure. But the 3 members of the atomic triangle and their radiation, now that is, those will each be counted separately, and the 3 knowledge petals, and the 3 love petals, and the 3 sacrifice petals. So we're probably up there to 12 and the 3 synthesizing petals, and these 7 radiations, or facets anyway, 7 facets. Maybe there are 8 radiations, and that's a bit of a mystery, but 7 facets of the jewel in the lotus, and sometimes the radiations are considered to be 7, but sometimes 8. The 8 coming forth from the 7. So we clearly have 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. That's 15, plus 7 is 22. And I wonder if there are other ways to consider. It's possible that there are other considerations as well, and other enumerations. We had, interestingly, the idea of the 24, the representation of Shambhala in the midst of the central fire. Well, all the numbers in occultism reveal the manner in which the creative process has occurred. So they have to be tended to carefully. But to consider the Egoic Lotus as a 16 as a kind of a throat center in a way, because it does create form. From it comes the human being on the lower 18 subplanes. And as a 5, as demonstrated, related to the great fifth ray into the 5th plane and to the 5th aspect, the monastic aspect, and as a 6, as a representation of the monad, the number of the monad, and as a 12, a heart center, leaving out at this point the central life and considering that more in relation to the monad. And then as the 22, which is the combination of the 3 sevens and plus the entirety. And DK has spoken of the 21 powers, and then we sum them all. The final one is a synthesis. Here is something from Cosmic Fire 1245. It should be remembered in this connection that there is a jewel at the heart of every atom. And remember, an atom is not just an atom of substance. An atom is a man, an atom is a planetary logos, a solar logos, and on, the different logoi. Every jewel has 7 facets, which are the 7 doorways to the 7 paths, and this would be especially so of the monad. Because when one is what can we call it? A monad that has returned to itself, a completed monad after the pilgrimage, one is taking the 6th initiation and is ready to embark upon the way of higher evolution. Now, interestingly enough, there are now 9 paths. 9 paths. 2 additional paths had been offered on the way of higher evolution. And can we correlate that 9 in any way with the central fire? The 7 facets are there. How is it that the monad can take now one of 9 paths? Because the monad is, after all, the one who journeys on the way of higher evolution. The monad, a unit of being consciousness, sometimes called Atma Buddhi, but it is the essence, the essential unit of being, accompanied by such consciousness as is possible for that unit at its particular degree of immersion in matter, which I sometimes simply call prakritic immersion. And here are some different quotations that I've brought together which pertain to this. At the heart of the sphere is a central blaze of light emitting these rays, which are given, I guess, as 7 in number, and play upon these points or circles analogous to electrons in the atoms of science, and at this stage produce most effect upon the astral permanent atom, emitting these rays. Let's look in Cosmic Fire for that, make sure that I've quoted this correctly. There seems to be one place, and here it is. At the heart of the causal sheath is to the clairvoyant a sphere of vibrating light, living substance. Within it can be seen 3 fiery points. At the heart of the sphere is a central blaze of light emitting rays. Here it is, emitting rays. These rays are given as 7 in number and play upon these points or circles, analogous to the electrons of science, and at this stage produce the greatest effect upon the astral permanent atom. So, emitting rays. So this will correct this. These rays are given as 7 in number, and sometimes, strange as it may seem, 8. But at least this 7ness relates to the 7ness within the jewel, and it will relate to the 7 head centers which are connected with Vulcan. And Vulcan, we know, is that worker in metal, maybe in stone, and also taking the rough, the diamond in the rough, or any precious stone in the rough, and exercising his art upon it until it becomes a true gem, true gemstone. So there is a Vulcanian relationship here in the central jewel in the lotus, and there is a way in which 7 does relate to Vulcan. The number 7 does relate to Vulcan, as it rules the central jewel over which Vulcan has power, and also there are 7 centers of will in the head. Here's another one which I think is important. The jewel itself remains occultly static and does not circulate. Around it are these rotating vortices of force. It is a point of peace, a kind of a Shambhala center in the middle of it all, because Shambhala is said to be the perfect point of peace. It pulsates rhythmically, that's a first reaction, pulsation, as does the heart of man, which is the center of life, and thus its first ray, and second. And from it ray forth 8 streams of living fire, which extend to the tips of the 4 love petals, and the 4 sacrifice petals. It looks like we're not considering the knowledge. We're not considering the knowledge petals at all. So there would be 3 normal love petals and a sacrifice love petal, and then there would be 3 normal sacrifice petals and a love sacrifice petal. This 8-fold energy is Atma Buddhi, and our question is, are these radiations the same? Are these 8 radiations in the same category as the 7, what should we call them here, light rays, as the 7 light rays emitted from the 7 facets. Okay. As the 7 light rays emitted from the 7 facets. Maybe not. Maybe not. There is definitely a numerical discrepancy, but we do know structurally the jewel is 7-fold. And one begins to wonder about these 8 streams of living fire. Why 8? And are they of the same order as the light rays which emanate from the same facets? Well, we can't answer that yet. Now going on a little more, the first aspect, motion, is, yes, associated with pulsation in the heart, even though the heart is qualitatively associated with the second aspect. In every heart are both the second and first aspects, the life and the love. And we have to remember that. And it's so it's the home of the first aspect. The jewel is. Jewel in the lotus representing the first aspect, it pulsates and it doesn't rotate, which is interesting. Around it rotate other tiers of petals, and apparently in contrary motion, 9 and 3 going in different directions, just the way we have the planet Earth, with the gyration, the direction of the gyration of its axis being opposite to that of the direction of its rotation on its axis. So the gyration of the axis is different from the rotation. And from what I've been able to see, the gyration is clockwise and the rotation is counterclockwise. So that pulsation, think of it, the power that touches and then withdraws, that is of the first ray Lord. One of the names of the first ray Lord. Well, if it's first ray and it's Shambhala, let's say, you can't just, the power that touches continues to touch, continues to touch, continues to touch until that which is touches is totally destroyed. Well, and you see, so that's the reason for pulsation, to give an assimilable touch of energy and not overmuch, which would destroy the form. In that sense, pulsation is related to revolution and rotation, because it's the circling in rotation and the circling around a center in revolution that gives a way of assimilating the central point, the energy of the central point, not all at once, but incrementally according to the part of the rotating body that is facing the source. Now, I've come up with another thing here. Doing our numbers work. If we wish the jewel in the lotus to represent Shambhala, the number which is 24 or 6, we can do it this way. So the 3 members of the triangle and their radiation, because it's of course, the energies that are important. The 3 knowledge petals and their radiation, 3 love and their radiation, 3 sacrifice and their radiation, the 3 synthesizing petals and their radiation. And at this point, the 8 radiations of the jewel in the lotus, and then the radiation of the entirety of the Egoic Lotus. You always can take the whole finally and count it as one, and all its parts taken as a unit, making the 24th unit. But we still do not know the sources of the 8. There is a geometrical figure which has 8 sides, a platonic solid. And if we talk about a 7-faceted jewel, we don't know exactly what it would look like, but we can imagine the octahedron. But apparently the jewel is not an octahedron. And even though it has 8 radiations of a certain kind. So the mystery of the 16 rays of the ego will be revealed when the force of the sacred Tetractis is merged with that of the Holy 12. And this is interesting. This is really well, I may say this later, but this is a 22. Because the Tetractis has 10 points, and the Holy 12 has 12 points. And, it's the Deva evolution, which is connected particularly with the 12 and the human with the 10. So this is a difficult statement here, and what do we make of it? Well, the 16 rays of the ego summing to 7, and we have no trouble justifying the 7 emanations of the sevenfold jewel in the lotus, may have their origin as specified in the 16 parts of the lotus. So there are 10 parts to the sacred Tetractys. But when we examine the number of rows, we find only 4. And thus the Tetractys, as the word suggests, tetra, is a 4 as well as a 10. So the Holy 12 can be any of the many 12-fold structures. The zodiac is one such proposal, and the Holy 12 can represent also the heart center, which is the chakra. The heart center, which is the chakra, representative of the heart center. I think I want to add there of the monad. Anyway, the Egoic Lotus is a 12, which represents the heart of the monad. So obviously the 4 and the 12 sum to 16, but which 4 and which 12? Well, okay. Can we make a Tetractys out of the ego? Is there a way to make a 10? Well, there is a way to make a 10. One way to make a 10. One way to make a 10 is by leaving the lower triangle out altogether as pertaining to the lower form, and leave the atomic triangle out, and use the 9 petals plus the unit of the 3 petals of synthesis and the jewel as one. Well, we did find, of course, earlier the way to make the 22, and it had to do with adding in the sevenfold jewel to the other 3s. The Tetractys, of course, can mean many things, and in its structure, a tenfold constitution of man is indicated. Wherever there's a 7, there are 3 more. There's a 10. So the principles usually associated with man. The first dot, the monad. The 2 dots in the second row of the Tetractys are Atma Buddhi, yes. The 3 dots in the third row of the wheel, 3 aspects, abstract, Manas, son of mind, within the causal body, and the lower mind. So these are mental abstracts, and the 4 dots, considering principles, Kama Manas, Kama Prana, and the etheric body, by some way of reckoning principles. So we can find a way to look at this is looking at the constitution of man in terms of the Tetractys. Constitution of man as a Tetractys. And yes, let's get that. So we can look at the egoic structure as follows. The first dot in the first row of the Tetractys represents the jewel in the lotus and the first ray. The 2 dots of the second row of the Tetractys represent the 3 synthesis petals produced by Buddhic energy, hence the number 2, because Buddhi is the 6th principle, but gives us the second ray of love wisdom. The 3 dots in the third row of the Tetractys represent the 9-fold structure on the higher mental plane. Often the Egoic Lotus is referred to as a wheel with 9 spokes and 9-petaled lotus. So there is a funny kind of way that if we don't include the atomic triangle, the 9 petals represent the third aspect of divinity, and 9 is the number of the third aspect of divinity. Then the 3 synthesizing petals represent the second aspect, and the jewel in the lotus, of course, the first aspect. Then the 4 dots in the 4th row of the tetractys represent the 3 members of the atomic triangle, which precipitate the 4-fold personality. You know what I mean here. Lower mind, astral body, etheric body, and dense physical body. So we have a way then of understanding the jewel, understanding the egoic lotus itself in terms of a tetractys. So we're changing different perspectives here. From another perspective, we may be talking about merging the 12 of the heart center with the 16 of the throat center. And you know, this is something just occurred to me. All right. Something just occurred. And let's see what it is. There's another way of saying the merging of soul 12 in the heart and the personality 16 at the throat. So that's the 22. But what if the monadic structure is 12-fold? Well, let me spell it correctly. And the egoic structure, including the atomic triangle, is 16-fold. Then we have another way of reaching the 22 with what we call the monad ego. And maybe I'm going on to talk about that here. There may even be a 12ness to be seen in relation to the monad. I gather this from the second ray old commentary healing formula, speaking of the higher 12. How the lower 12s respond to the greater 12. So the 12 sign Pisces, I leave the Father's home and turning back I save, that's a 12. It's certainly connected with the monad because it sends it forth, Pisces sends the monad forth on its mission of redemption. So there must necessarily be a connection between the monad and the major 12 petals of the head center, indeed. So another perspective shows that the holy 12, when added to the tetractys, not considering it as a 10 but a 4, yields 16, the number we have been looking for. So the holy 12 and the 4 together, 16, which is the number of the egoic lotus. So, yes, there's more to be said here, and our pondering will be required to determine which 12 and which 4 must be summed to yield the 16 rays of the egoic lotus. Certainly, we find it easily when we just sum the parts of the egoic lotus, considering the jewel in the lotus as a unity, and that we began to do right at the outset of this little discussion. But I'm actually kind of impressed by this idea that we can count the egoic lotus itself as a tetractys. If we just as a 10, and that we can arrive at 22. See, we count the egoic lotus as a 10 if we leave off that which represents the lowest aspects in the unreal world of personality. And we can get the magical number 22 if we count a 12-foldness in the monad and a 16-foldness in the ego. Now, I also wonder whether there's a 16-foldness in the monad as well. Because always, you know, with the higher 12, you've got to have that point we call the 13th, which is the Christ in the center of his disciples and the sun in the center of the zodiac. We could arrive, and there may be a central triangle in the monad with sort of 12 radiations, a triangle, and a point. which will bring a 16. And then we add that, other numbers are coming to my mind. We add that 16 to the 12ness of the egoic lotus as a heart center, and we get the Om, whose number is 28. 16 plus 12, and that equals 1. Well, we can play with numbers quite a bit. The point is, can we make them practical in some sense? And when we learn the mantrams and the particular rates of vibration associated with the different layers of matter, then the numbers and the words will become practical and we can do something. Right now, we have to content ourselves with simply learning. So what I've been trying to show here from this simple footnote is that we can count the egoic lotus and the monad even in various ways by extreme differentiation and also by combining various structures. As I said, every tier is really a 1, and yet it's a 3. So sometimes we may want to combine the structures as when we derived a 5 from the egoic lotus, the jewel, and each one 4 tiers of petals. And sometimes we may want to articulate them, the jewel and the 12. That would be a 13, plus 3 more in the atomic triangle is 16. And sometimes we may wish to articulate minutely, in which case we would add the 15 that come from the 4 tiers of petals, and then also the atomic triangle, that's 15, and add a 7 to it, which would bring us to 22, the 7 being the 7 facets of the jewel in the lotus. But, we also said, what if there are 8 additional radiations? I mean, before long we could come up with a 33. I can see how we could begin to do that. So it all depends on the perspective and how one wants to consider the nature of a structure. But for practical purposes, the egoic lotus is a great heart center. It's a heart center, or the heart center of the monad, of the entire constitution of man. And when we can live in that lotus, we have learned to live in the love-wisdom aspect, and when it is destroyed, we live in the spiritual triad, and the love-wisdom aspect is not destroyed because the triad itself is an expression of both the first and second ray. And when we return to the monad, the 12ness of the monad is there. It's a unit within the sun, which is a great heart center. So the love-wisdom gathered from the expanded lotus is not destroyed by any means when the egoic lotus is destroyed. But it is preserved and manifests even more fully and in a less bounded manner progressively. And all these things we will discover when we are liberated from this cave of materiality, cave of elemental materiality, in which we as personalities habitually live. This is another kind of footnote. The primordial is the ray and the direct emanation of the first sacred 4. The sacred 4 are Father, Spirit, Existence, Unity; the Son, Soul, Love, Wisdom, Duality; Mother, Matter, the Trinity; and their united manifestation, making the active evolving solar system, the logoic ring past knot, and this is, at least for our purposes, the macrocosm. Now, in this presentation here, we're not given the Holy Spirit as differentiated from the Mother. Mother is so often used as the fourth term associated with the number 4, and the Holy Spirit as Brahma with the third. So in this case, the fourth is treated by summing the first 3 and considering their unity as another unit, and this is often allowed in occult numerology. And the term unity, we have seen, is oftentimes associated with the second ray when synthesis is applied to the first. But sometimes unity seems to be applied also to the first ray aspect. So unity has this aspect of oneness, and hence its association with the first aspect, but also the many things that are harmoniously united are also considered in the unity, and hence its relation to relation itself, and hence its connection with the second aspect. Unification, we are told, is that towards which the second ray and the second aspect strive through the will to unify. That's the second aspect of the will. And yes, the solar logos is our macrocosm. There are many greater macrocosms. The statement in the text is interesting. The primordial ray is, when considering our solar logos, is actually the third ray, expression of Brahma. That is the primordial ray. At the beginning of cosmic fire, we're told, in relation to our solar system at least, the primordial ray is not the first, it is the third. And the divine ray is considered to be the second. So, the third ray, expression of Brahma, and one of the principal numbers of Brahma being 5. So if we sum the primordial ray and the direct emanation of the first sacred 4, we shall have the requisite 5 of Brahma. What we've been trying to do is connect the Egoic Lotus not only with the second aspect, but with the third. It has sort of 3 principles within it and an embodiment. When you look at the Buddhic plane also, there are, shall we say, 3 principles, three higher planes within the Buddhic plane, and the Buddhic is the embodiment. Of the cosmic ether, it seems to be the embodying ether. So there's the 3 and the 1. So the Buddhic plane embodies, and the Egoic Lotus embodies, and stands as sort of a 4th factor. Well, all of that simply from a couple of footnotes. So you can see what a profound study the ageless wisdom really is, and how Blavatsky brought forth for us some of the really profound aspects of the ageless wisdom, so demanding in a way, maybe that few students apply themselves to it. There's been a movement towards greater practicality in that which the Tibetan presented, and applicability in terms of many human activities such as psychology and healing and politics and science and economics, all kinds of things, religion, where the knowledge of the ageless wisdom per se could be actually applied in what the human being does. So we go on to say that we must now, this is, the Tibetan is writing in black here, and the commentary is done in blue and other colors. We must now deal with the subject of the causal body on its own plane, and from the point of view of fire. Fire relates very much in general to the first aspect, though there are 3 fires of the 3 aspects. Fire by friction, the third. Solar fire, the second, and electric fire, the first. This is sort of the ABCs, and we know that. This is, after all, a treatise on cosmic fire. And fire is, it's sort of the first expression of being. And where there is fire, there is always motion of some kind. Whether it is pulsation, or spiral cyclic motion, or rotary motion, where there is fire, there is motion. Where there is absolute beingness, there are no parts, and so there is no motion. It's as if perpetual motion is ingrained in reality, because there's the constant breath. The breath has had no beginning, it has no end, and it is the ultimate symbol of duality. We can, in a sense, relate this greatest of all breaths to what we call the breath of fire. The breath of fire has particular applications to the energy system of man. That's how that term can be used when dealing with Kundalini, but I'm talking in a very high philosophical sense. You know, the great breath, we might say, when speaking of the great breath, we could say fire, no fire, fire, no fire, and on, no term being the beginning, especially. When there is universe, there is fire. And maybe I'll capitalize it. Universe, there is fire. And when we're dealing with the absolute reality, we cannot call it fire. Fire, motion, and particularity go together. Fire, motion, and, well, specificity go together. So we're going to be studying the causal body apparently here from the principle of the first aspect. Its various fiery sounds, fiery colors. We'll have to see what that will really mean for us. DK tells us that we have studied from the more ordinary angle and in materialistic terms, not really looking at causes, right? Not really looking at causes. Considering this causal body as a vehicle of rarefied substance, but substance is fire, of course, isn't it? Containing within itself the seventh principle of each of the two lower sheaths of the microcosm and the mental unit. How interesting to consider the physical permanent atom and the astral permanent atom as seventh principles, respectively, of the astral body and the physical body. Is it the seventh principle itself, or is it the embodiment of the seventh principle? Do these permanent atoms, or are these permanent atoms, we'll put it that way, are these permanent atoms the actual principles of the physical body and the astral body, or are they embodiments of those principles? It depends on whether shall we consider principles material. And in a way, I do not consider principles to be material, but kind of modes of motion, modes of apprehension, modes of consciousness. When you consider Buddhi, do you consider it material? I mean, is a Buddhic permanent atom a principle, for instance? Is a Buddhic permanent atom a principle or an embodiment of the principle of buddhi. I prefer the latter, but it may simply be that I don't sufficiently understand what he's saying. So it is clear that the mental unit cannot easily be considered the seventh principle of the mental body. It only has 4 spirillae, and this distinction, at least in the context we are discussing it here, would be reserved for the monastic permanent atom, which has, interestingly, like all the other triadal permanent atoms, only 3 spirillae. So somehow we still get a 7 on the mental plane with the 4-fold mental unit and the 3-fold monastic permanent atom. To study in terms of substance, he says, is to study in materialistic terms, but if we study in terms of fire, it is not. And maybe, to study in terms of fire is to study motion. It seems difficult to find that there is any type of motion or any type of fire where there is no motion. So the only motionlessness that we have, and that is, of course, theoretical, is in absoluteness. And yet it is the source of infinite variety of motion. Well, we're getting a little philosophical, but all of this is part of the Egoic Lotus chapter, just these 13 pages in Cosmic Fire, which we can consider in a way to be a definitive source, the core source of so much that he developed later in other books. So the latter, I guess he means the mental unit here, is that which embodies the first aspect in manifestation, and which is analogous to the first logoic aspect, one that in the solar system does not come into full demonstration, that is so important. The mental unit is not the complete permanent atom, and so signifies in the realm of personality manifestation the first aspect. It's the highest of the 3, which in this second ray solar system will not come into manifestation. And here, the general idea here is that the mind is the conduit for the will. When we look at the spiritual triad, it's obviously Atma, the atomic permanent atom, which is the conduit of the first aspect, Buddhic permanent atom, second aspect, monastic permanent atom, third aspect. But when we separate the personality from the higher triad and from the Egoic Lotus, we have another type of structure in which mind takes the place of the first aspect. And so the mental unit is the creator of the lower mental body, creator of what we call mind and the personality, and hence it represents the first aspect, the astral body, astral permanent atom, second aspect, and the physical permanent atom, which is really etheric, of course, the third aspect. So he wants to point out here, it's kind of interesting how he begins this, because he's talking about the solar system and larger macrocosmic factors before really getting into the Egoic Lotus. Well, the solar system is a great lotus, and it has its own type of Egoic Lotus on the higher mental cosmic plane, or cosmic higher mental plane, which is either 21-fold or 12-fold, depending upon how the references are read. So when we study this, he says, studying the solar system as the physical manifestation of a solar logos, we are investigating the physical permanent atom of a solar logos as contained within the logoic causal body on its own plane, which is the higher cosmic mental plane. And we know that these permanent atoms, members of the atomic triangle, are considered to be contained within the Egoic Lotus. They are found at the base of the lotus, which presumably means under whatever under, over, and all of that means on those higher planes, but under the petals. So there is some kind of physical permanent atom on the higher, or at least contained by the matter, is it, of the higher mental plane, or the energy of the higher mental plane, and it's associated with Saturn. Saturn is a correspondence to the physical permanent atom of the solar logos. So although the physical permanent atom of the solar logos is said to be contained within the logoic causal body on the higher, and I want to say cosmic mental plane, it is composed of substances of our systemic logoic plane, the first cosmic ether. So we have to look at that word contain. So this is analogous to the idea that although the human physical permanent atom is contained within the human causal body on the systemic mental plane, that permanent atom is composed of etheric substance of the systemic atomic etheric plane. The way this looks, if we can, I can make this just a little bigger, but not too big. A physical permanent atom is here in our microcosmic setup, and yet somehow it is enclosed or contained within the substance of the higher mental plane. Enclosed, surrounded. It doesn't mean that the physical permanent atom actually moves to the higher mental plane, nor does it mean in the solar logoic sense that the physical permanent atom of the solar logos, which is found on the systemic logoic plane, moves to the cosmic mental plane, and yet it is contained. So contained, a word which must be closely examined, meaning more surrounded by and held within a periphery. So it is the expanse of the two types of causal bodies which makes it correct to say that the members of the atomic triangle, if the solar logos has a mental unit, and I think it does, I think it's sometimes considered to be the Earth, interestingly enough, and Venus, the monastic permanent atom, sometimes. Maybe the Earth. So it's the expansiveness of the two types of causal bodies which make it correct to say that, I'm discovering some typos, that the members of the atomic triangle, if the solar logos has a mental unit, we are actually told in places that it does, are contained within the periphery of the causal body. So substantially, the material composition of the physical permanent atoms in either case is not of causal substance. I think we understand that. And yet the enshrouding, the ensphering, the containing, so that it's not causal substance, that is substance of the higher mental plane, either the systemic higher mental plane or the cosmic higher mental plane. And yet there is a notion of containment because it's within the aura of the two types of causal bodies. And I don't know how we would register space on the cosmic mental plane. We have some idea that we can still speak in terms of space when we're dealing with our own lower 21 subplanes of our systemic plane. But these physical astral permanent atoms and the mental unit are said to be at the base of the lotus. Of course, they are atoms. So being atoms, they are tiny, and it's often made me wonder whether the causal structure itself is not, at least with the human being, somehow on the atomic scale, very small, with an immense radiation. Nothing is said about the actual scope of the causal body. In other words, in spatial measures, or scope of the Egoic Lotus. The causal body, yes, apparently, it is a factor produced by radiation, and it has a great extension beyond beyond a number of rather oval-like auric fields. But in terms of the generator of that causal body, which is the Egoic Lotus, there's nothing said about its size. It could be the tiniest of things, somewhat on the atomic scale. All right, well, these are sort of some preliminary cosmic considerations. The seven types of force and the seven logoic spirillae within that permanent atom. So what was the first one here? In studying the solar system, we are investigating the permanent atom of a solar logos. Okay, now that's connected with Saturn, which is said to be a correspondence to it, at least. And, it's always, it must be a question of perspective, but it's always troubled me how the various planetary schemes can either somehow represent permanent atoms of the solar logos and be home to certain principles, then we are told, if they last throughout the Mahamanvatara, if a planetary scheme lasts throughout the Mahamanvatara, and also be embodiments of the chakras of a solar logos. I think this still, how can they be both? This still has to be worked out, at least in my mind. There is an interesting relation, I think, between Venus representing the mental permanent atom of the solar logos from one perspective, monastic permanent atom, and the Earth representing the mental unit. But from another perspective, it is Saturn as the physical permanent atom, Neptune as the astral permanent atom, and Uranus as the mental permanent atom. So we are given some partial configurations which have not been entirely worked out by us. In Master DK's mind, I'm sure it's clear. So when we are considering studying the solar system as the physical manifestation of the solar logos, we're also considering the seven types of force, or the seven logoic spirillae within the permanent atom. What are they? This, if realized, gives a new outlook upon the subject of plane vibration, because these spirillae are the systemic planes. At least from the solar logoic perspective, the seven types of force related to the physical permanent atom are the seven solar or systemic planes. The seven systemic planes and are the vibrations of the seven spirillae within the physical permanent atom of the solar logos. Now, it's on page 406. I think I want to turn to this in Cosmic Fire, where he basically tells us about these three synthesizing planets. And he says here, he says, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn will therefore have absorbed the essence of manifestation, and in connection with the solar logos they correspond, here it is, the three permanent atoms of the causal body of man. If, the mental unit, of course, is sometimes called a permanent atom. We say correspond, for the analogy is not in detail, and Uranus and Neptune are reflections of the logoic, astral, and mental permanent atoms, which then would seem to be perhaps something other. Saturn is in fact the correspondence to the logoic physical permanent atom, because we're talking about a physical planet in relation to the physical cosmic physical plane. But when we talk about Uranus and Neptune, we're also talking about physical planets, but they are in relation to the cosmic astral and cosmic mental planes. So how they appear on the cosmic physical plane are considered reflections. This is an occult mystery and must not be separated from its allied truth in the cosmic scheme. I've gotten into this in my written commentary on this, but I think I would go way off the track if I tried to bring in all of these factors right now. But you can just look this up in the Cosmic Fire commentaries on Makara and see if I said anything worthwhile at that time. What is a cosmic scheme? Well, we have a systemic scheme, but a cosmic scheme is something in which our solar logos is simply a heart center. We're dealing with the cosmic logos. Even the word scheme is tantalizing because it will make our solar system something of a chain in a cosmic scheme. A certain chain within that sevenfold or tenfold cosmic scheme. But as I say, I'm not going to veer off because there's such complexity here that it would defeat us a little bit. So since Saturn is the correspondence to the physical permanent atom of the and I want to put it there, in fact, a correspondence to the physical permanent atom of the solar logos, there must be a strong connection between Saturn and the 7 logoic spirili. Now, I guess I didn't really have to go looking because I had brought this reference in. And I've just spoken those words with Uranus and Neptune as reflection of the logoic astral and mental permanent atoms. But we must not remove Venus from the picture. Venus should not be moved from the picture, nor the Earth when considering it in relation to the mental unit of the solar logos. Okay, now we're studying the solar system from the physical point of view, and so point C is we would also be studying the close correspondence between the planes and the 7 spirili in the permanent atom of a solar logos. Now, we've been talking mostly in terms of physical systemic planes, but there are probably cosmic astral subplanes and the great cosmic astral plane and cosmic mental subplanes and so forth. So maybe we can imagine this somewhat, and we will have to establish whether the 7 systemic planes are only correspondences to the 7 spirili in the physical permanent atom of the solar logos, or whether the 7 planes are the 7 spirili of the logoic physical permanent atom. This seems to be taking us far away from the Egoic Lotus, but it is in that section. So okay, so we have through the medium of the planes, which are the correspondences to the 7 spirili of the physical permanent atom of a human being. So if we have spirili of a human being and the planes are correspondences to them, they must be, in fact, the 7 spirili of the physical permanent atom of the solar logos. So we have touched upon these spirili and their function very briefly, thank goodness, and can now approach the question of the egoic ray and the fire of mind from the subjective point of view, or in terms of fire. And that's so interesting because basically he's not talking about appearances. He's talking about what these things are like from the inner vision. So if we work in the realm of fire, we are dealing with subjective work fire is God and God is subjectivity. Okay. So now we have made it to structures that are more akin to the Egoic Lotus itself. The other was background consideration, and basically it seems to be telling us that we're taking up a cosmic consideration, though in a microcosmic way, and that there are important correspondences between the two levels. So this next section, let's just see, I think it's on, we started on page 536, and we'll see how far we've gotten. Probably not very far. The Egoic Lotus, and I think we are just about to take up centers and wheels. Well, we may have covered one page, but it's been 9 pages of commentary, you see. So we're taking up centers or wheels of energy. This is putting the whole subject in a larger context. So centers of force. We shall again reach the clarity of vision desirable if we study the subject of monadic development from the angle of vision of the human unit. And I just want to say that when studying the Egoic Lotus, one must always study the monad as well, because the Egoic Lotus is an extension of the monad with the supplemental structuring power of the solar angel. So we study the microcosm here as a practical measure, and from there we may be able to generalize meaningfully to the other and larger context. As I've said, study the high and understand more about the low, study the low and understand more about the high. So it has been taught, says the Tibetan, in many occult textbooks that man has 7 centers of force, or 10 according to some calculations. Remember, always suspect the 10 when you see a 7, because there seem to be always 3 subjective factors in relation to any objective septonate. So the tenfold calculation must be considered carefully as it applies to the number of planetary schemes in a solar system, the number of chains in a planetary scheme, and perhaps even the number of globes in a planetary chain. There are some subjective chains and, I think, subjective globes, and maybe that has something to do with the inner round. And we've also been taught how in the permanent atom, which has 10 parts, 3 superior and 7 inferior, the 10 may be transformed into a 7 by considering the lower 3 simply as reflections of a higher 3. Otherwise, you would have kind of a 13, which is meaningful in its own way as well. But we are allowed to combine groups of numbers in various ways to reinforce a particular perspective. So that in many occult textbooks, man has been considered to have 7 or 10 according to calculations. The 3 of these centers are paramount and eventually synthesize the other 4, or absorb their force or energy. Well, we have the 3 synthesizing planets, don't we? We have those on the macrocosmic level. 3, how about a spelling here? 3 synthesizing planets. The synthesizing planets have usually, centers have usually been considered the heart, head, and throat, usually the 3 major centers. But the 3 major centers in the head can also, from another perspective, be considered the synthesizers. And finally, let's not forget, in a way, the why don't I do this, and this should be a 12. Yeah. Let's also consider the three within the head, the jewel, the greater 12 within the head, and the other 960 petals. Three aspects, and ultimately the head is the synthesizer. So what we have here is the idea that synthesis produces obscuration of the passing out of manifestation, and there is an occult dying away of all the centers as they are absorbed into one center. So the process of synthesis, of gathering all the many into some, the some into a few, the few into three, the three into one, this precedes obscuration per se, precedes pralaya. And the stage of absorption has also to be factored into this sequence. Shall absorption be considered a part of synthesis, or shall absorption with its sense of finality follow obscuration? Well, maybe both. The sequence we've been using is synthesis, obscuration, absorption. But we may not be justified in making these terms utterly distinct. Suffice it to say that the many wheels of force that we have been studying are absorbed into a final, and then that itself disappears in pralaya. So this is paralleled in the logoic centers, the planetary schemes, which also in due course of time. See, death, after all, is the raising of all the centers of the vehicles into the head center. And eventually the abstraction of that energy from the dense physical body. That is, if death comes as a natural and orderly process. There are the logoic centers too, which are the planetary schemes. Notice how he calls them centers and not homes for principles, which are physical, which are permanent atoms. In a way, the permanent atoms have a kind of a higher status than a chakra, because within any vehicle generated by a permanent atom, many chakras appear over and over again. And if we're looking for the source of both permanent atoms and chakras, we have to look into the monad itself, whether it's the monad of a solar logos or the monad of a man. So in the planetary schemes, they also pass into obscuration and transmit their energy to the three major schemes. So it would seem in this transmission following obscuration, we have what we might call absorption of the lesser into the greater. We'll put that down, absorption of the lesser into the greater. The major three schemes, as we should well know by now, are Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, with a double emphasis given to the Saturn scheme, which can, from one perspective, simply be considered a normal planetary scheme, or in the larger sense can be considered the entirety of all schemes to be absorbed in the third aspect. And, you know, if we turn to chart 6, I'll show you what I mean here, and you've seen it, I think, a number of times. That's one diagram I'd like to use, but there's one that's clearer that Tuya made, and here it is. And this is, in a sense, greater Saturn. Saturn as simply a planetary scheme is here, but this is greater Saturn, which seems to include all that is can be related to the third aspect, or Brahma, within a solar system. So lesser Saturn, greater Saturn from a certain perspective. Maybe it's sometimes called esoteric Saturn. So here's a little tabulation which is familiar to us, I think. The three main centers in the microcosm of the head, the heart and the throat. And these are the usual descriptions: monad, will, spirit; ego, love, consciousness; personality, activity, matter, corresponding to the three centers. And this is familiar to us. In the disciplic microcosm, which we actually have reviewed in preparation for this study. The throat is ruled by Saturn, the heart by Jupiter, and the head by Vulcan. So the three, not all the three synthesizing planets are there, but they are higher rulers, I think, of those centers at later stages of development beyond discipleship. Between the first and third initiation, which should include the stage of discipleship, beginning really at the first, the head center is ruled by Uranus, and we can say that Neptune, the repository of the solar flames, gains increasing influence over the heart center, and Uranus becomes also prominent at the throat with the growth of the seventh ray at the throat. So even though, on page 517, we have planets that are not synthesizing planets ruling the head and the heart, in a higher way, the synthesizing planets, which are the monadic 1, 2, and 3, do find their way back in to rule man's microcosmic 1, 2, and 3, his head, heart, and throat center. Well, we're laying out the map here. This whole study is, in a way, a map. And we will have practical experience of these things, but it's always best, I think, if a country has been mapped, it's always best to study the map before going there. If you're going into entirely uncharted area, or as they say, uncharted waters, well, okay, you're the pioneer and you have no map. But we do have a map, and I think it's the part of wisdom to study it. Here is something I brought in from Esoteric astrology. The throat center is ruled by Saturn, just as the two head centers are ruled respectively by Uranus ruling the head center and Mercury ruling the ajna. This is only where the disciple is concerned. The rulership changes after the third initiation or before the first. Well, if this is the disciple, we're really talking about the period from the first initiation to the third. That's where the disciple really reigns. After that, we have the initiate. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Uranus as continuing in its rulership of the head center with sort of Vulcan, Neptune at the heart and the head. And I don't know what else we would substitute. If we simply go into the head, we may find that Neptune has a place at the ajna center and Saturn at the alta major center. Well, we won't get lost in the correspondences here. Suffice it to say, we keep moving upward towards synthesis, and there are ways of dividing the head center. The head center contains everything, so we can find all the three aspects and all the synthesizing planets there at a certain time when the man is being ruled entirely from the head center. Vulcan could be considered as ruling the 7 centers within the head, and Vulcan also associated with the heart of the sun, which is like the heart and the head of the highest head center, but Neptune belongs there as well, and Neptune belongs at the ajna center, and Uranus belongs to all of the many, many petals of the ajna, of the highest head center, but as it is in a way the master planet, maybe not yet, maybe in the next solar system, with its first ray monad, more the next solar system. Neptune is more the master of things. Will Uranus with Vulcan be at the central jewel? Uranus has that seventh ray precipitating power also, and that sevenness in the jewel is sevenfold. So what we can take out of this is that the head center has everything, and the three synthesizing planets really have all the rest of them within. And so when we look at that synthesizing head center, we're going to want to find all of the synthesizing planets playing predominant roles, which is not to say they don't play roles in the other parts of the body. Says the Tibetan, it will therefore be apparent that just as in man these centers are related to the threefold spiritual man in his total development. So the three types of centers, microcosmic or macrocosmic, come gradually more and more under the vitalizing power of one of the three aspects of the Logos. When the monad anchors itself, at least microcosmically, it tends to choose the head, the heart of the throat, depending on whether it's ray 1, 2, or 3 of the monad. And this will also operate in terms of the greater, in terms of the greater type of being. We've been told that by the time the first initiation is taken, one of the three major centers comes into greater prominence, depending upon the monadic ray of the microcosm, as the monadic ray has much to do with chakra dynamics, indeed, and how the various triangles of the chakras, different points within the triangle are activated according to the monadic ray. If they have resonance with a particular monadic ray, they will be activated sooner than normally is the case when the monadic ray is other. Maybe it's always the third aspect that is first activated, but when you have a second-rate monadic type or first-rate monadic type, the other point in the triangle is activated much sooner than otherwise it would be if the ray were different. So we're looking here at the three major centers as they at least connect the head and the torso. If we go entirely into the head, the centers will change, and the ajna center may take on a second ray meaning. And if we go entirely into the head center per se, the ajna and head center will be considered as one, and then we'll have to find other ways. The second aspect will represent the heart in the head, and the central jewel will represent the first aspect. So here are some other statements. This is effected definitely at the first initiation when the polarization becomes fixed in one or other of the three higher centers, which center being dependent upon a man's ray, and that's just what I was saying, and of course look at how decay blinds this. A man's ray, in this case, is the monadic ray, but he doesn't say so. And working so much as we do with the soul ray, we might think that's a man's ray. But by not being too specific in places, a form of necessary blinding can occur, and one has to simply work it out according to one's ability to understand. If the monadic ray is the third, the throat center will receive extra vitalization by the first initiation. If the second ray, then the heart center. If the first ray, then the head center. So what is the monadic ray? And, it's always going to be ultimately one of the three, but as we also have been studying and realize, there are 7 monadic rays. And again, that's the structure. Wherever there's 7, always expect 3 more. So the very highest 3, which I think relate to the logoic plane, are the first, second, and third, and the other 7 rays relate more to the monadic plane. This is my present theory. With all theories, you hold them, you test them, and you finally accept or reject them as further confirmation or disconfirmation comes. So these centers are recognized also as focal points of active force, manifesting to the vision of the clairvoyant as fiery wheels or the flaming petals of a lotus, either the 16, the 12, or the 960 plus 12. 972 altogether. And, well, I'm tempted to start counting in the head center just as I did within the Egoic Lotus, but I'll leave that for another time. So the wheel and the lotus are two ways in which the solar angel appears to be represented to the candidate passing through the first four initiation ceremonies. An angelic presence is also conferred, we are told. So in the actual initiation ceremony, and can it be so? It's certainly so for the first two. Maybe things begin to look a little different for 3 and 4. There is a representation of the solar angel as wheel, lotus, and angelic appearance. So it's important to realize that the petals are as flaming petals. And we've been talking about fire here. The chakras are manifesting in different fires. So if we are examining the lotuses from the perspective of fire, then we have to realize that the petals are fire as flaming petals. So we tend to think substantially as if we were dealing with a concrete form here in the lower worlds, but no, we are actually dealing with inner radiant movement, which we can call fire. So substance is fire, really. There's really nothing that's material at all. It's just our rather veiled perception that makes us perceive apparent materiality instead of fire. The whole outer world is fire also, and maybe one day, well, almost certainly one day, will be so perceived. So materialism is just a limitation of perception. I think we can say that. And with the inner perception acute, everything appears as fire. All or everything appears as fire. Well, we finally made it to the place where we're dealing with the causal body as the monadic heart center. Point A above was what? Can I find it? Not sure I can. Let's see. Want to know? Well, the best thing, of course, is to simply go to cosmic fire where we've been. And point A was centers of force. Without the commentary, it's much easier to see. And point B, the causal body, the monadic heart center. And so we're ready to begin our discussion of that right now. So here we are, the causal body, the monadic heart center. And of course, because it is a heart center, the number 12 is always associated with heart centers. The heart and the head of the one about whom naught may be said, we are told, is the zodiac itself, zodiac of constellations. Heart centers all the way up, at least as far as we can see, seem to be associated with the number 12. So viewing the causal body as 12-fold can be accomplished if the jewel in the lotus, which represents the first aspect, and the 3 units in the atomic triangle representing the third aspect are eliminated. We just keep it within the second aspect particularly. Or at least we keep every aspect pertaining to its own sphere. The jewel in the lotus is really a projection of the monad. And the 3 members of the atomic triangle pertain really to the personality. Of course, it all ends up having the source within the monad. But suffice it to say, the number 12 is what is accentuated, and when it comes into the powers of the jewel in the lotus, that's another study, and I wonder whether DK will bring that out in his next work. It seemed that so much of the historical third ray aspect was brought forward with Blavatsky. With Alice Bailey, the emphasis has been upon the second ray. Of course, DK is a second ray master, and he is teaching along that line. Excuse me. But maybe in the third installment, which we can expect after 2025, who knows whether in 2025, but not before, apparently, the first aspect will be represented. Well, let us hang on and see. We can only hope that, well, I'm sure it's well in hand, this third installment of the teaching, and will be the of great importance and value in helping occultism win the day by the end of the 21st century, as HBB predicts that it must. So let us stay involved with it and aid that winning as much as we can. So in studying the egoic body, he says, it should be remembered that the causal body is the correspondence in the monadic manifestation to the heart center. It's a threefold manifestation. We can call it the three periodical vehicles. Monad, Egoic Lotus, personality. Or maybe we should call it soul Egoic Lotus. It is a flaming wheel of fire. He told us we're going to be studying it from the fire aspect, right? Within the monadic auric egg. So we could say, hence the appropriateness of the word ego when related to the monad. So, so the causal body then is within the periphery of the monadic auric egg, just as the permanent atoms are within the periphery of the causal body, but is not co-substantial of the same substance. It's of a lesser substance, of a lesser vibratory rate. So we can have the idea of enclosure occurring when different vibratory rates are involved. The highest vibratory rate will be, in this particular setup, will be the monadic, the vibration of the monadic auric egg. The triadal vehicles will also be included at some point, and they will be of lesser vibratory frequency. The causal body is included as a heart center at this time within the monadic auric egg, even though it has a lesser frequency. The energy of which it is composed is of lesser vibratory frequency. And on it goes. So that we get the sense of enclosure, vibration, space. It begins to look like a spatial kind of configuration. And maybe on the cosmic physical plane, some idea of space is possible. After all, we're told that the Buddhic permanent atoms are, I believe that's correct, are shaped somewhat like the figure 8. Well, if there were no space to be considered, there could be no shape of the 8. So, and that's on the cosmic ethers. So perhaps within the cosmic physical plane, space, somewhat as we conceive it, is still allowed, and the whole idea of enclosure of spheres within spheres within spheres is operative on the cosmic physical plane. So in gaining some clear idea about the anatomy of a man's inner vehicles, location of a factor within another factor may not depend upon co-substantiality. of the first factor with the second. You know, everything here is co-substantial. If I have a sphere and there's a lesser sphere within it, they are made of the same material and the same frequencies for the most part. But not when we consider enclosure involving dimensions of different vibratory frequencies. So the members of the atomic triangle are, quote, located within the causal body but are not co-substantial with any part of it. I think that's an important point, and maybe I hit upon this word co-substantiality a little later than when I was trying to describe it before. The causal body is located spatially within the monadic auric egg from a certain type of reception, but is not co-substantial with it, and yet the withinness is still significant, still said to exist. Excuse me. So, it is a flaming wheel of fire within the monadic auric egg, which embraces the 5 planes of monadic manifestation, the monad being on the 6th plane. 5 planes are external to it because they have a lower rate of frequency. So, you know, the atmic, buddhic, monastic, astral, and etheric physical are those 5 planes. The monadic auric egg includes within its periphery the sheaths to be found on all the 5 Brahmic planes. So, as I said, it would include the buddhic and atmic sheaths as they become organized and coordinated, which is not immediately. You know, if the coordination of the buddhic vehicle seems, from most references, to occur after the 3rd degree, then when does the coordination of the atmic vehicle occur? The permanent atom is there, but I imagine that the field to be built around that permanent atom is still a little bit inchoate before a certain point of initiation is reached. Now I'm getting into some stuff here. Well, on the surface, this text statement seems straightforward, but there could be problems associated, so much depends on how we read the previous 2 sections of text. We can easily fathom that the monadic auric egg would embrace the 5 planes of monadic manifestation, okay? It would be much more difficult to justify that the causal body could embrace these 5 planes, which could be one interpretation. I don't think so. The causal body cannot really embrace 5 planes. It would be more contained within it. It is a flaming wheel of fire within the monadic auric egg, which embraces 5 planes. It's not the causal body that embraces. It is the monadic auric egg. So atmic substance, buddhic substance are not co-substantial with the higher monastic matter out of which the causal body is composed. So in what matter could the causal body manner, in what manner, I think, is the word, could the causal body embrace 5 planes? I think I just misread it, basically. It is the monadic vehicle that embraces. We can say that the force of Atma and Buddhi make their way into the causal body via the petals of that causal body. And we can see that in chart 8. Atma influences the sacrifice petals, Buddhi the 3 love petals, and probably each of them will influence one of the synthesizing petals, yes. But we have sometimes seen within the causal periphery a triangle representing Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. So certainly the energy of the spiritual triad is playing through the translated into the Egoic Lotus, but it's easy to resolve this. From this perspective, then, it would be possible to say that the causal body embraces or encompasses, well, if not the 5 planes of monadic manifestation, at least 3 of the Brahmic planes, etheric, physical, astral, mental, and 2 additional energies, which somehow are centralized within the sphere of the causal body, but they are not co-substantial. I think the preferred reading is, I don't even know why I went through this, but it's that the monadic auric egg embraces the 5 planes of monadic manifestation, including the causal body. The causal body. Okay, so embraces the 5. It is also seen as the 12-petaled lotus, and this is the way it's most usually depicted, and most of the information that's been given to us about the causal body has not been in terms of the 9 spokes, the wheel with 9 spokes, etc., nor in terms of an angel. So it has this heart-center association, and we are really studying solar fire, higher monastic fire, when we are studying A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and the parts of the book that DK predicts will be most frequently read by the majority is all about the second aspect. The discussion of the book about the third aspect, it's in the beginning of the book, and it's quite technical, and would be of interest to the scientists working in the field of matter energy. The last part of the book is short, and it relates to, relatively short, it relates to the first aspect, and one would have to have a certain capacity to really study it. It's not where most people are. We'll be studying the soul aspect mostly. So of these 12 petals, the innermost 3 are unrevealed. They are closed in still, but opening with initiation, or are embryonic, and hence the causal body is frequently considered a 9-petal lotus. Well, there we have it, and that's the reason why so often it is considered to be the 9-petal lotus, when in fact we who study this know there are really 12, or as a wheel of fire with only 9 spokes, or whirls or vortices, you know. The use of the word petal is revelatory in terms of the unfolding of consciousness, but when looking at the actual energy demonstration, whirls and vortices are probably more descriptive. Looking at the energy demonstration, the words whirls and vortices are more descriptive. I think so. So this is, a very good explanation, and it shows how the lotus can be considered both 12-fold and 9-fold, and we need to keep this in mind. We can say, however, that these 3 innermost petals are no longer embryonic for one who has begun to tread the path of planetary initiation. Even at the first initiation, we're told that one of the synthesis petals, I suppose associated with knowledge, begins to unfold. And at the second initiation, the second, and presumably at the third, the third. So there is activity there. For most people, no, maybe, but for those who are actually treading the path of initiation, yes. So all of this is essentially true as regards the evolutionary process, but when man has succeeded in awakening or unfolding the 9 petals, or in arousing the fire of the 9 spokes or whirls, all the different language used here to describe this 9-fold structure, which is practically consummated at the 3 major initiations, not entirely. You really at the, I would say that the second tier is not really fully unfolded until the second initiation. Then the inner 3 are revealed. Yes, well, they have been, work has been done upon them. In other words, at every initiation, there is a degree of activity within within the corresponding synthesis petal. Now, how much there is, let's say at the second initiation, how much one really begins to see these synthesis petals in unfoldment, that remains to be seen. During the second and third, let's say during the first and second initiation, it remains to be seen, indeed, how much of the activating synthesis petals are actually, quote, seen, revealed, let's say revealed. We know they burst open at the fourth degree, but the question remains about whether they are seen or detected or felt in some manner before that final bursting. And I would say so. It would seem so. We'll have to correlate some references here. So the majority of the evolutionary process involves the 9 petals. It might only be one life that really involves the development of the innermost 3. So when he tells us that the unfoldment of the 9 is practically consummated at the 3, does it mean that the unfoldment of all the 9 is completely consummated by the time the third initiation is taken, or almost so? I think so. It would seem there are other places where he does say that the unfoldment of the 3 sacrifice petals is accomplished by the time the third initiation is taken. Of the last tier of the 9, remains to be accomplished between the third and fourth initiations, but maybe not. Other references contradict and tell us that the 3 inner petals, sacrifice, are unfolded by the third degree, and then the work is focally on the innermost petals. So let's take a quick look at something if I can find it. And here is what I wanted to find. It is a reference. Let's see. Each of these 3 petals is related to one of the 3 circles and is organized as each of the 3 circles is unfolded. They form, therefore, a synthesis of knowledge, love, or sacrifice, and are closely connected through the type of force flowing through them, with one of the 3 higher centers of the planetary logos of a man's particular ray, which may not, of course, be our planetary logos at all, but if we have the first ray, it could be Vulcan, or the second ray could be Jupiter, and so forth. The central unit of threefold force is dealt with in a specific manner at initiation. And this is the point. At the first, the second, and the third initiations, one of the 3 petals opens up, permitting an ever freer display of the central electric point. So even at the first degree, when the 5th petal is completely opened and work is being done, the rod of initiation is being applied or directed to the 7th, something is happening in this inner tier which can be called opening up and revealing an interior light. At the 4th initiation, the jewel being completely revealed through its blazing light, its intense radiatory heat, and its terrific outflow of force, produces the disintegration of the surrounding form, the shattering of the causal body, the destruction of the Temple of Solomon, and the dissolution of the lotus flower. The work of the initiator in this connection is very interesting. Through the medium of the rod of initiation and certain words of power, he brings about results of a coordinating, transmuting, and liberating nature. So Sanat Kumara is involved in this process. And the jewel in the lotus is active. The monad is active. The Buddhic plane is active. The lower atomic triangle is active. We have learned in other places. Through the action of the rod as wielded at the first two initiations, the two outer circles unfold. Now, this is the question, is there, for the very first circle, not a complete unfoldment, until the first initiation. We know at the second initiation there seems to be an unfoldment of the second circle, but it has to be examined carefully whether there is an unfoldment of the first circle only at the first initiation. Elsewhere it seemed to say that as the first circle completely unfolds, a type of earlier initiation, a lesser initiation, can be undergone, not directly related to the first initiation. But anyway, this is what it seems to say here. Through the action of the rod as wielded at the first two initiations in relation to the seventh and eighth petal, presumably the two outer circles unfold, the energy of the two is set free, and two sets of force as embodied in the six petals are coordinated and become interactive. This stage of petal adjustment succeeds that which is earlier called unfoldment and has to do with the simultaneous action of the two tiers of petals. So maybe, I've always been under the impression that the unfoldment of the first three petals occurs before the first initiation really is consummated. Otherwise, we would have the first three petals and the fifth petal completely unfolded, which would mean the fourth petal would have to be completely unfolded. It's always seemed to me that when we look up the minor initiations, we'll have to do that. The unfoldment of the first tier gives us entree into a type of initiation in which a certain type of group consciousness begins to show itself, but not the complete first initiation type of consciousness. These apparent contradictions have to be reconciled. So there is a stage of petal adjustment, at least after the two initiations, and there's some simultaneous action of the two tiers, probably a type of rotation. The interplay between the two circles is completed, and the circulation of the force perfected. According to a man's ray and subray, so is the rod applied to what might be termed the key petal. And here we learn that the rod is actually applied to a petal. And it's not just a question of the direction of force. From some references I've gathered that to be the case. But okay, he says application. This, of course, differs according to the unit of force involved and the monadic ray. It might be of interest to note here that as the petal substance is Deva substance of those planes, and as the energy of the petals is the energy of certain Manasadevas, one of the three higher orders of Agnishvatas, substanding the substance, the initiate is overshadowed. The word is not entirely satisfactory in explaining the key type of Deva service here necessitated, but it must suffice, by a great Deva who represents the equilibrium of substantial vibration which is brought about by the efforts of the initiate, aided by the adepts who present him and who each represent one of the two polarities of force. Amazing thoughts, and it looks like we're going to have to go over these parts of Cosmic Fire, but I had thought that writing it out might be enough, but there might be more explanation that's needed and some elaboration. Anyway, at the first, second, and third initiations, one of the three petals opens up, permitting an ever freer display of the central electric point. So we have to keep that in mind when it seems to tell us that the three are still hidden at the first and second initiation. I want to make that even bigger. Okay, so I'll keep that as kind of something on the side. There are other references here. The main references are here, and if I need them, I'll call upon them. So the inner three are revealed. The 9 spokes, which is practically consummated at the major 3 initiations, the inner 3 are revealed. 9 petals are arousing the fire. The 9 spokes are whirls, which is practically consummated at the 3 major initiations. The inner 3 are revealed. So we have just seen, especially from page, I think it is, well, what is it? Maybe 883 approximately. So we'll just say check out or view 883. See, for instance, TCF 883 and 884. So the majority of the evolutionary process involves the 9 petals, and the 3 inner petals appear to be opening, displaying some of the central fire at each of the 3 initiations, according to one reference. So according to one reference, we'll put this down, according to one reference at each of the first 3 initiations, more of the central fire is revealed because the synthesis petals are opening. I think that's the word that was used. Well, ever freer display. Opens up, yes. One of the 3 opens up. It's there. You know, until we can see these things directly for ourselves, there may be mistakes. And so many think they see these things and they don't, and there are mistakes, because it's simply the astral reflection of what's going on. So the inner 3 petals are called the synthesis petals, and when they are in the process of unfoldment, the consciousness of the initiate is in process of achieving a relatively complete synthesis, at least in terms of the human kingdom, in knowledge, love, and power. And we can meditate upon and dwell upon what does it mean, the synthesis of knowledge. That's fairly easy to grasp. What does the synthesis of love mean? Finding the love of the planetary logos everywhere, perhaps? The synthesis of power or will, finding the will and power of the planetary logos in all acts of will, perhaps? The many items of knowledge he has experienced through his long evolutionary journey are being synthesized in what might be called knowledge of wisdom. Knowledge of wisdom. The many loves are being synthesized into the love of the divine. The many skills, faculties, or powers are being synthesized into a great adequacy when facing the normal conditions of human living. And his ability to wield spiritual will is becoming consummate, heading for consummation, at least with respect to his development within the 4th kingdom, which he is rapidly leaving behind. So that's a little attempted explanation of the meaning of synthesis. We always have to go back. The inner 3 are revealed. This is essentially true as regards the evolutionary process, but when man has succeeded in awakening or unfolding the 9 petals, or the 9 spokes, the inner 3 are revealed. And they respond to the monadic vibration, just as the spiritual triad does, being an externalization of it. It's like the 3 synthesis petals are closely related to the jewel, just as the triad is closely related to the monad. So they respond to the monadic vibration of pure spirit. And it is the stimulation or revelation of these inner petals by the one initiator at the 3rd and 4th initiation. So there must be a greater, an increasing revelation even at the 3rd, an increasing revelation at the 3rd degree, which brings about the final conflagration and the blazing up of the causal body with the subsequent liberation of the central positive life or fire, and we would say that here into the triad, into the spiritual triad, and eventually to the monad, returning. Now, I'll look at some of the other thoughts that have been offered here. Well, it seems that the greatest stimulation of these synthesizing petals does occur between the third and fourth, so it's reasonable to think of them as stimulated by and responsive to monadic vibration, which becomes conscious and focal at the third initiation. In other words, in a way, the monad comes into view at third initiation, and the initiator is Sanat Kumara. So much greater stimulation of that which is associated with the first aspect as the, from a certain point of view, the central three and the jewel are. If we differentiate them, the central three are more Buddhic and the jewel more Atmic. So it's chart 8 we've been looking at shows the line of monadic power descending straight to stimulate the jewel in the lotus, and probably as well, while doing so, the three synthesizing petals which are drawn around the central jewel. Get it? And if we can make it just a little bigger. Well, the line goes straight down, and we really don't see any lines coming into the lemon yellow petals there. Not really. But certainly the major line of force in the monad does stimulate them. And we do have to remember they were developed by a downflow of Buddhic force, so there must be some connection with the Buddhic plane. So each of the synthesizing petals can be conceived of as correlated to one aspect of the spiritual triad, right? Either the knowledge part, the love part, Buddhic part, or the Atmic part. The three inner petals as a whole arose as the result of Buddhic stimulation. Let's just take a look at page 709, where we should be able to find that. Let's see. Here we are. This is how it all works out. At a certain stage of vibratory activity, the work of the Lords of the Flame, having produced a body of form and a vibration calling for response, there occurs a practically simultaneous happening. A downflow of Buddhi takes place along the line of the monastic triangle until it reaches a point at the very center of the lotus. There, by the power of its own vibration, it causes a change in the appearance of the lotus. At the very heart of the lotus, three more petals appear, which close in on the central flame, covering it closely and remaining closed until the time comes for the revelation of the jewel in the lotus. We're really talking about the initiatory process. The Egoic Lotus is now composed of 12 petals. 9 of them appear at this stage in bud form, and 3 are completely hidden, and, at least at that time, mysterious. And notice that the downflow of Buddhi occurs along the line of the monastic triangle, which I suppose occurs here, because there is a monastic connection here with the lotus. Not all lines are drawn, but it's not straight from the Buddhic plane. It goes from Buddhi through Manas, apparently. So then the jewel in the lotus would seem to be to be directly responsive to the monad and to Atma, and as the principle of man, closest in nature to the monadic nature. So Buddhi is directly related to the 3 synthesizing petals, but they are also stimulated by the downflow from the monad directly. So it is the, as we had read before, it is the stimulation or revelation of these inner petals by the one initiator at the third and fourth initiations, which bring about the final conflagration of the blazing of the causal body. Okay. So we're getting the picture, We're not necessarily looking at the Egoic Lotus from beginning to end in a sequential manner, but we can fill in these different steps. And we will go sequentially when we have the knowledge base to really understand how to relate the many energies and processes to the petals and tears one at a time. So we are speaking of the alchemical liberation of the central positive life or fire into the triad first, and then in its return. I don't know what it means to be liberated into the triad before returning to the monad, but I know the references support that idea. Between the third and fourth initiations, the jewel is revealed, and it looks like the light of the jewel is revealed at each initiation increasingly. And it is the opening of the synthesizing petals that reveals the jewel. But at first, maybe not so much. Maybe we are first dealing with first translucence, and then transparence, and then the actuality, or the actuality of the jewel. So as the jewel is progressively revealed, its power is unleashed in the act of destroying the causal body, even at the third degree. At the third degree, there is disintegration of the outer three petals, gradual, because intuition is taking over. The study is after the third degree, the study is of the intuition, and one is increasingly Buddhically responsive, and so the knowledge petals per se are not needed, but the disintegration is not a loss of all that has been stored in the knowledge petals, because there is an elevation of that content into the mental oh, I'm sorry. Sneeze. Monastic permanent atoms. See, that's the kind of thing that should be edited out, but whether there will ever be any editing of these things, one does not know. Anyway, the attempt is, simply to bring forward the interpretation, and then it can be discussed and affirmed or repudiated as the case may be. I'm certainly not claiming all knowledge with respect to this matter, simply trying to correlate much of what has been said. So the causal body has been destroyed in a number of ways, or is destroyed from different agencies, from the touch of the rod of the initiator, as we have been reading, from triadal and monadic impulses, from below as a result of the intensely heated activity of the atomic triangle, which is gathering in its heat, and finally these three representatives of form are very effective in contributing to the destruction of the vehicle. The stage of synthesis achieved from the time of the third to the fourth is signaling the impending destruction of the lotus. So we realize that the Christ as initiator is not so much involved with the stimulation of the central petals, but they are opening up, definitely. At the first two initiations, first and second, one of the three petals opens up. So what the Christ does, and it does look like there's going to be a directing of force to the petal, there will be an ongoing gradual revelation of that which is contained within the hitherto hidden area of the Egoic Lotus. So here let's see, we should be on page 537 by now. We might be really inching along here. Let's see where we are. And maybe even 538. Yes, we're really making progress here. All right, we are on, the end of 538. We're moving along. So solar fire is dual. It is the fire of matter or substance and the fire of mind blended. This is a very interesting statement. It's simply often called the fire of mind or the fire of love. When we speak of the matter of substance, we have to decide whether the lower substances are involved, the substance fires of the personality, or only the matter-substance fires of the higher mental plane. And that seems better, it seems to me. It does not seem accurate to consider the matter-substance of the planes of the personality when considering solar fire. So we don't even consider solar fire for the lower 18 subplanes, except as to the manner in which solar fire affects the fire by friction of the lower 18 subplanes. So we discuss the fires of matter-substance primarily here, I think, in relation to the higher mental plane. Solar fire, however, is also, as we have earlier established, active on the triadal levels, and so the substance there will also be involved. We're talking about the solar fire aspect of Agni, and it seems to involve the monadic, atmic, and buddhic planes. So it is the fire of substance and the fire of mind blended. And that, I think, is a phrase which requires a lot of pondering. I would say this blending only begins with the substance of the higher mental plane. It's not strictly the fire of mind per se. Why this should be so? Well, we can understand it's the fire of love, so it should be dual. The second ray is a dual ray, the ray of love and wisdom, and which aspect correlates with which? The fire of matter or substance and the fire of mind. Which with which? I can't really answer that at the moment. Man demonstrates, so this is another bringing in of ancillary references, useful references. Man demonstrates his electric fire on the second plane, or the second cosmic ether, as solar fire on the third, fourth, and the three higher subplanes of the fifth plane. So that type of substance will be involved. That type of substance belonging to these planes and subplanes will be involved. And it's fired by friction on the lower subplanes of the fifth and the sixth and seventh, the 18. But this is really important, isn't it, what the Tibetans brought out here. Demonstrating as solar fire on the third, fourth, and three higher subplanes of the fifth. So solar fire is definitely found in the triad, and not only upon the higher mental plane. And there is a place, if I can find it, I'm always hunting for these things, but let's just say Agni, and we might, oh goodness, don't tell me Agni is going to be, maybe here. And Agni is correlated with the sea of fire, yes. Solar fire on the second, third, and fourth subplanes. Here we go. He, Lord Agni, shows forth as solar fire. Now remember what was just said before about the third, fourth, and part of the fifth. Now Lord Agni shows forth as solar fire on the second, third, and fourth, and as fire by friction, at least from the soto-logoic point of view, from the fifth, sixth, and seventh. So I think this is a soto-logoic point of view. I'm just going to kind of copy it, and I'll put it into our our references here, and we'll say additionally. Additionally, this will be important because Agni really is of the solar logos, and what we're talking about here, man demonstrating his electric fire on the second, has to do with the planetary logos. Here, the solar logos is implicated in the previous reference. It was the planetary logos. And things move up and down a plane depending upon the type of being we're talking about. And here I've chosen the way out, let's just say, and said, look, we don't have to address this complication in this context, but I guess I have already somewhat addressed it. So this makes man, the six-pointed star of light for each of these fires is triple. So the triple fire of mind, and that the fire of matter substance is also triple. So that is the two together will make the dual solar fire, and related by sixness to the monad, the six-pointed star. From one perspective, it is the three fires of matter substance, fire by friction, considered as a triple fire. And the three fires are called the fire of mind, which makes the star of light. So there are a number of ways to render the fires of matter substance into a triplicity. And we will try to keep things simple. Yes, let's do that by focusing on the higher mental plane and stating that the three fires of matter substance here discussed are related to the three higher subplanes of the mental plane. And we will also affirm that the fires of matter substance, even matter substance of the higher mental plane, are not the same as the fires of mind. Otherwise, he wouldn't differentiate them. The fires of matter substance and of mind can also be seen as both dual and triple. In fact, we must say that both these kinds of fires, matter substance and mind, they are unitary. They express through duality. They express through triplicity. So generally, probably one of the best ways to view the fires of matter substance as triple is as follows. Okay. So the internal fires of the system of the planet and of man are threefold. Interior fire, we studied this at the beginning of the book, and the center of the sphere, those inner furnaces which produce warmth, this is latent fire. Remember, latent and active radiatory fire. Radiatory fire, this type of fire might be expressed in terms of physical plane electricity, of light rays and etheric energy. This is active fire. And then essential fire, or the fire elementals, who are themselves the essence of fire, and these are divided into two groups, the fire devas, or evolutionary entities, and the fire elementals, the involutionary entities. This is a little bit of an extract, bringing this in from page 52 earlier. So the threefold division of fire is usually used in relation to the 18 lower subplanes, the planes of personality, and if we try to apply the triple division to the three levels of the higher mental plane, then interior fire would be analogically associated with the third subplane, radiatory fire with the second, and essential fire with the first. So it sounds as if solar fire, described above as dual fire, is formed by the triple fires of mind, each blending with one of the three fires of the higher mental substance. This six-pointed star is a very generic figure in occultism and can be formed in many ways. Blending substance and mental fire is one of the ways, but also the six-pointed star is that of the monad. Interesting that Master Morya, in his one of his earlier incarnations as Akbar, his symbol was the six-pointed star, and he had it on many of his buildings. When I was there, I saw it, and in Agra it was, and also it's called the Seal of Solomon. It's a profoundly occult, astronomical, cosmological symbol, but Solomon used it as a six-pointed star and it was related with him, and he was an earlier incarnation of Master Morya as well. So somehow this monadic six-pointed star, I think, is very connected with Master Morya. It's certainly not simply, the Star of Israel, or the star of the recent nation Israel. It's not just that, it's much more. So when we read all of this, we can only agree with the Tibetan when he states, it is therefore obvious that this matter of fire is as complex as that of the rays. Right. And I think we'll have to leave this to some of the scientists who will have the mind to get into cosmic fire. The fire of mind is also, in essence, dual, bringing in another triplicity, thus making the 9. So we have the solar fire as the fire of mind and the fire of matter substance, and then the fire of mind being dual as well. So if the fire of mind is essentially dual, then each of the members of this duality can be divided into a triplicity. So examining the fire demonstration on the higher mental plane, we would have the threefold fire of substance matter relating to the three subplanes of the higher mental plane, the threefold fire of one division of the fire of mind, and the threefold division of the other division of the fire of mind. So how shall we understand the duality of the fire of mind? Well, one easy way is to think of the fire of concrete mind and the fire of higher mind. That is one possible method. But when dealing with solar fire, we are thinking of fire upon the higher mental plane and not of the elemental fires of the concrete mind itself. So our division of the fire of mind into a duality must occur in relation to the higher mental plane. Well, perhaps that is so. If we concentrate upon developments upon the higher mental plane and seek to divide the fire of mind there found into a duality, we can have the fire which animates the normal 9 petals of the Egoic Lotus and the fire which animates the jewel in the lotus and the 3 innermost petals. That may be one way of dividing. I'm not sure that it's necessary that we solve this completely, but some prospects are offered. It would appear that each member of the triplicity of fires which animates the 3 tiers of petals of the Egoic Lotus is further divisible into a triplicity because each tier of the Egoic Lotus has 3 petals. So he said the question of fire is as complex as that of the rays, all the rays and subrays, and here we have the fires and subfires. We have to remember that even though the inner petals are Buddhically derived along a monastic line, and the jewel in the lotus is monadically and probably atmically derived, these energy structures are nevertheless found upon the higher mental plane and thus are necessarily related to the energy of the higher mental plane. So, in this case, it is probably the monastic permanent atom, which is that particular energy of the higher mental plane which is related to the inner structure of the Egoic Lotus. The monastic permanent atom is threefold, isn't it? The MPA is threefold because of the 3 spirille which compose it. So we can begin to wonder about the substantial positioning of the jewel in the lotus and the inner or synthesis petals. Are they ever located on the 3rd and 2nd subplane of the higher mental plane, or are they always to be found upon the 1st subplane and even between the 1st and the 2nd, as it is sometimes said about between the 1st subplane of the mental plane and the lowest subplane of the Buddhic plane? It is said that of the jewel in the lotus. So are they ever located on the 1st and 2nd subplanes of the higher mental plane, or are they always to be found upon the 1st subplane, even when the other aspects of the Egoic Lotus may be focused on the 3rd and the 2nd, or between the 1st subplane and of the mental plane and the lowest subplane of the Buddhic plane? So we can see how much intricacy there is here and how little of the truly technical nature, we actually know. So let's confine ourselves to the higher mental plane in this discussion of the fires of the Egoic Lotus, and we can suppose Whether it's going to be correct or incorrect remains to be seen. That the essential dualism of the fire of mind mentioned in the section of text above refers to a fire focused in relation to the third and the second subplanes of the higher mental plane, and another fire focused in relation to the first subplane. So there's a triplicity there. The mental fire focused in relation to the third and second subplanes is first triple, because it has to animate the 3 tiers of petals of the Egoic Lotus, and then ninefold, because each of the tiers is triple. So there's a ninefold fire and a threefold fire. The higher of the divisions of that portion of the fire of mind confined to the higher mental plane is the division we will associate with the monastic permanent atom and all that point of force animates. So this fire is, in a way, the representative of the threefold fire of the triad. It is triple anyway, because of its 3 spirillae. Since the spiritual triad is expressing the world of Brahma, its 3 fires are, in a way, mental or monastic. So this whole question of divisions and subdivisions into dualities and triplicities is not easy to understand, and it would be easy to gloss over the inherent difficulties in the first few sentences on the 12-petaled Egoic Lotus. But we must not allow ourselves to do so, and we have not, and not that I suggest that you concentrate all that excessively on what has been proposed here. Triplicities evolve out of dualities, and one member of an original duality divides again, and thus a triplicity is formed. And it works that way with, I was going to say on the rays, from the psychological point of view, this method of division can be seen in relation to how the second subtype of the second ray soul, that from that, a third subtype is created through subdivision, yielding 3 major subtypes of the second ray soul and a number of others, as he says as well. So that is a little bit of a complex explanation. The fire of mind is also, in essence, dual, bringing in another triplicity, thus making the 9. One would begin to wonder whether, the fire of the monastic permanent atom per se, which is on the first subplane, is not most related to the sacrifice petals. Let's see if that is the case in the diagram. Not in this diagram, no. But one might be able to infer it, that the higher type of mind, let's just say that which comes from the monastic permanent atom, has a lot to do with the sacrifice petals per se. Okay, don't give up. I won't if you don't. All right. When a man has awakened the 9 fires and has unfolded the 9 petals, and when he has received the stimulus which is imparted at initiation through being brought into conscious contact with the electric spark of his own particular heavenly man, they all merge and blend. There's really interesting things being said here. If we tabulate the 9 fires, at least according to the present hypothesis, we would have 3 fires of matter substance relating to the matter substance of the 3 highest subplanes of the mental plane. There is, after all, what do we call it? Elemental essence, and even the highest subplane is called monadic essence, but it is substance energy, and it belongs to the plane. A type of mental fire, then point B, a type of mental fire in 3 and 9 divisions, which animates the 3 tiers and the 9 petals of the Egoic Lotus. And also a higher type of mental fire, which is associated with the 3 synthesis petals and in some manner difficult to determine with the jewel in the lotus. So these are possible types of mental fires that we can find on the higher 3 subplanes of the mental plane. If we remember that solar fire expresses through the spiritual triad as well as through the higher mental plane, and we've just reviewed those references, we can relate the 3 higher mental fires connected with the monastic permanent atom to the spiritual triad. After all, it is still solar fire, isn't it? Atma, Buddhi, and Manas are all monastic in that respect. The spiritual triad is ruled by the third ray and by Saturn, we see in the study of the spiritual hierarchies. So they express the world of Brahma, and Brahma is Manas from the perspective of the greater Logos. So Atma expresses on the third systemic plane and is thus a blend of mind and will. Buddhi is called the transcendental mind, and C, the fire associated with the monastic permanent atom, is obviously monastic. So the triad, just as the personality is in a sense related to the third ray and to Manas, so is the spiritual triad as the personality of the monad related to the third ray and to Manas. So we should be cautious in realizing that the 9 fires which have been discussed do not have a one-to-one correspondence with each of the 9 petals, but that the interplay of these 9 fires, 3 fires each divided into 3, ensures that the 9 petals will be open. I think that's an important point. So it all fuses and blends together, and this is most interesting about the electric spark of his own particular heavenly man. Well, we seem to be talking about the people of Earth, and Sanat Kumara is the initiator and the representative of the Planetary Logos, but is there a way in which somehow the electric spark of the Logos that a man's ray is correlated with is somehow conveyed? The monadic nature of his own particular heavenly man might be conveyed to each individual through the process of initiation, depending on the ray of his monad. So the human monad is an electric spark of a particular heavenly man, and not necessarily the heavenly man of Earth. After all, it all really comes from the sun. So at first it seems that we are speaking of the heavenly man of the Earth scheme, but in another way, each monad may be particularly related to one of the other heavenly men, a heavenly man who expresses through a different planetary scheme, So, because the monastic permanent atom is the highest structure to be found upon the mental plane, it will be analogically related to the monad, considering the monad as the highest of the 3 aspects of man's constitution. We remember we talked about the mental unit in relation to the personality as carrying the first aspect, astral, second aspect, and the physical permanent atom, the third. So one analogy here would be as follows. Monad, soul, and personality correspond respectively to monastic permanent atom, then the fires which animate the 9 petals of the Egoic Lotus, and then the mental unit. That's one way of doing it. We're being told that at the third initiation, the initiate is brought into conscious contact with the electric spark of his own particular heavenly man. The third initiation, therefore, is one in which electric fire is definitely involved, and some references tell us that the third initiation is taken on the ray of the monad, even. So at the moment of climax, in the case of the 3rd degree, there is a blending and merging of 9 fires with the energy of the electric spark via the jewel in the lotus, though not the entirety of that energy, for still more is released at the 4th initiation. So in this respect, the 3rd initiation is characterized by the number 10, which, of course, makes sense. It's on the 5th ray, interestingly, and the 1st ray comes in. To the degree that the energy of the 3 synthesizing petals are involved in the fusion of the 9 fires of the Egoic Lotus at the 3rd initiation, such energy is considered one with the energy of the jewel in the lotus, through which the energy of the electric spark of his own particularly heavenly man reaches the initiate. So the number 10, then, is appropriate in the context of the 3rd initiation, considering that the 10th sign, Capricorn, is the sign archetypally associated with the 3rd initiation, the 10th sign. I may have gotten, just a little bit too intricate here, but okay, I'm trying to, go through this section of cosmic fire, which is specifically related to the Egoic Lotus. It does have some ramifications. So another enumeration of 10 can be conceived in relation to the fourth initiation. The destruction of the three members of the atomic triangle, the destruction of the three tiers of petals, each of them threefold, the destruction of the three inner synthesis petals, and the destruction or translation of the jewel in the lotus. You know, it really goes to here, if I may say. We just go here to, see what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull up another version of this because I don't want to disappear the other one. And if we look at, let's say, page 23, okay, it's this. Let the group together move the fire within the jewel in the lotus into the triad, and let them find the word which will carry out that task. So obviously the jewel in the lotus is first going into the triad before it returns to the monad. It's all a question of time, but then not many lives are remaining, and this whole thing can be done, the fourth and fifth initiations being taken even the same life. So that's a 10, another enumeration of 10. So it would seem that the monastic aspect of the electric spark, that is of the monad, reaches the third degree initiate via the jewel in the lotus and the aspect related to love wisdom at the fourth degree. It is the second aspect of the will which is really very strongly involved in the destruction of the jewel in the lotus and the causal body. Well, do we call it really the destruction of the jewel in the lotus, or its translation of the central fire? Maybe that's more like it. So just reading over a little bit of what DK has said, when a man has awakened the 9 fires and has unfolded the 9 petals, and when he has received the stimulus which is imparted at initiation, through being brought into conscious contact with the electric spark of his own particularly heavenly man, remember, his monad is that, and the jewel in the lotus is the extension of his own monad, so the electric spark of his own particularly heavenly man will relate via his monad and via the jewel in the lotus. They all blend and merge. Let's see. They all blend and merge, yes. That's at the third degree, certainly. And the inner 3 petals, which complete the 12 and which are concerned with the final and essentially spiritual stages, essentially spiritual, notice how we've moved out of the Brahmic aspect, are really related more intimately to the evolution of the heavenly man. Well, he's already receiving the essential spark of his own particular heavenly man. So that's at the third degree, and it continues, I suppose, in intensity through the fourth. So that which is spiritual pertains to the spiritual triad, and in the initiation process, the initiations which specifically pertain to the focal influence of the spiritual triad, begin at the third. So once the third initiation is reached, one has entered more consciously, more intimately into the evolution of the heavenly man, and certainly this is so when working within the cosmic ethers. So the 3 petals which complete the 12 are related more intimately to the evolution of the heavenly man and are connected with the stimulus which he receives himself in contacting the logoic electric spark, or the pure spirit aspect of the logos. We'll look at that in just a moment. So the term logos is here used, but if we look at the sentence connected to the one above, we see that the inner three petals, which complete the 12, and which are concerned with the final and essentially spiritual stages of his evolution, are really related more intimately to the evolution of the heavenly man and are connected with the stimulus which he, the heavenly man, receives himself in contacting the logoic electric spark, or the pure spirit aspect of the logos. So this is a very deep statement. Maybe a few things, indicative things can be said, perhaps a few. So the term logos suggests solar logos indeed, and so we have a parallel process. The human being, when reaching the third initiation, contacts the electric spark of his own particular heavenly man, and when the synthesis petals of the man are stimulated, it reflects the stimulation which the heavenly man receives from contacting the spirit aspect or electric spark of the solar logos. So we could question to what degree different heavenly men contact the spirit aspect of the logos, as some of them are not even cosmic initiates of the second degree, but apparently it is happening. So we're into some pretty abstruse matters here. I don't think we have to solve these at the moment. It should be noted that this ninefold development is hinted at in the secret doctrine in the various places where HPB deals with the Kumaras or heavenly men, of whom the microcosm is a reflection. Okay, so the term heavenly men can mean many things, and here the Kumaras are called heavenly men. There are different kinds of Kumaras, some of them planetary, some of them intraplanetary. If they are the systemic Kumaras, the interplanetary Kumaras, let us say, or the ones that exist in the solar system, one can understand this, for the systemic Kumaras are planetary logoi. Yes, indeed. There are also intraplanetary Kumaras, and perhaps they are to be called heavenly men as well, in a different sense. In any case, we can say that the microcosm man is a reflection of a heavenly man. Perhaps it is even more true to say that the microcosm is a reflection of the solar logos. So HBB calls them the lords of knowledge, lords of love, and lords of sacrifice. So it appears that the heavenly men considered as Kumaras, according to HBB, come in three categories, as stated. The categorization may well depend not only upon their rays, but on the degree of unfoldment of the tiers of their Egoic Lotus. And I think that's very important, whether they are lords of knowledge, lords of sacrifice, lords of love or sacrifice, because they have similar petals to what we, the microcosm, have. Some of these lords are more sacred than others, and their degree of spiritual maturity and of unfoldment is unequal. So, each of them is a 9-petaled lotus in the logoic body, and more than 9, really, just the way man is more than 9. So as is the case with man, perhaps they are 9-petaled from one perspective and 12-petaled from a more advanced perspective. And we have another issue which surfaces here. In the human being, each chakra has a different number of petals. The planetary logoi, as Kumaras, are chakras within the energy system of the solar logos. So here it would seem that, excuse me, that they each can be represented as a 9-petaled lotus, perhaps a 12-petaled lotus. And why do each of them not have a distinctive number of petals? Or do they, when viewed from a different perspective, which is not the causal perspective? You see, I think that's the thing. We appear to be viewing this from the causal perspective. Perhaps we can solve this question by thinking of their causal nature as numerically uniform, right, consisting of 9, 3, and 1, just like the man, even though the numbers of the petals in their chakras found upon the cosmic ethers as well as upon the cosmic astral and all of that will vary. In other words, what they appear to be on the lower planes in terms of the number of petals they have may vary from what they are causally. In any case, we seem to be given a hint here concerning the structure of the egoic lotuses of the planetary logoi. Ninefold, it appears, from HPB's perspective. So they are flaming wheels. The wheel is another way of viewing the chakras. So these great Kumaras are lotuses, wheels, and may it be said angels also, because it is said of man that they are angels. In fact, archangels. The planetary logoi are archangels. The Saint Michael is Saturn from a certain perspective, and so it goes in correlation with other of the archangels. So it's important to realize that not only are planetary logoi called heavenly men, but according to HB, they are angels, archangels, perhaps, as well. The causal body of man upon the higher mental plane can also be seen as a lotus, a wheel, and an angel, right? In this case, the solar angel, and take a look at initiation, human and solar there in 115 and 116. It is as if the solar angel associated with a human being is a reflection of a heavenly man who is an archangel, perhaps. But perhaps it is their soul nature, in their soul nature, that the planetary logos are considered to be archangels, because thus it is with that which is associated with man. In his soul nature, he is the angel. The angel of the presence is very much, in a sense, a part of his egoic nature. So we can infer that just as there are great solar angels associated with the causal bodies of the solar logos, or solar logoi, I suppose, so it must be the case in relation to the causal bodies of planetary logoi. I think let's correct that, make it a logoi, you know. Along this line of thought, we do know that solar angels in groups endeavor to become heavenly men indeed. So what can we say? They are flaming wheels. We're going pretty cosmic here, but he's giving us the cosmic view of the solar angels and the condition of the planetary logoi as demonstrating as angels and so forth. In their various names, as found in the secret doctrine, maybe discover the clue to the mystery. So what are the names we're speaking of? Here are a number of them, and they should reveal some clue to the mystery. So what are these Prajapati, these planetary logoi, these flaming wheels, these logoi with 9 petals upon their own causal plane? They're called the 7 rays, the 7 spirits before the throne, 7 planetary logoi, 7 great lords, the 7 aeons, linking this with Gnosticism, the 7 emanations, the 7 Prajapatis, Light of the Soul 268. Other names from Cosmic Fire, the 7 planetary logos or spirits before the throne, right? Spirits before the throne of the solar logos. Oh, it looks like we have that already. Prajapatis, 7 Ray Lords, Dayan Chohans, 7 spirits before the throne, 7 archangels. So there it's a definite statement, and 7 logoi, the 7 builders. All right, we're looking at the relation of man, the microcosm, with his planetary macrocosm. Also here, divine Manasaputras, Prajapatis, Kumaras, primordial 7, Rudras, heavenly men, Rishis, so many names, but essentially we're looking at this whole question of the egoic lotus, starting from a large perspective. Sometimes they are said to be 7, but sometimes 10, and they are also called rishis. As it says above, with so many names given to the heavenly men, a number of valuable hints regarding their nature can be gathered. So DK goes on and says, let us realize clearly, nevertheless, as regards the microcosm, and later extend the idea of the heavenly men. Well, he's giving us a lot about the heavenly men first, and we can generalize from our understanding, hopefully increasingly clarifying, of the microcosm. So that which is now stated pertains to man, the microcosm. So let us picture the 9-petaled egoic lotus, usually 9 petals because for most people the inner 3 petals are not revealed, nor is the jewel, the heart center in the monadic consciousness. So He speaks again of this nine-petaled lotus, even though it is a heart center of the monadic consciousness. But behind the thought, as previously stated, is the fact that more essentially it is the 12-petaled lotus, and when the time comes for the revelation of the inner three, its 12-ness will be fully realized. The real esoteric development of the man, which relates to his own heavenly man and to the solar logos, concerns that which is generated from the cosmic ethers, namely the inner three petals and the jewel in the lotus. That's the really esoteric part of the man, and is not concerning so much his development in the lower three worlds, but his development as a soul. So the heart center in the monadic consciousness, unfolding each of its petals in groups of three upon the three subplanes of the higher mental plane, and that's kind of interesting because usually you don't see that kind of reference. The unfolding is generally thought to occur on two subplanes of the higher mental plane. And this is curious. I've heard people say, well, really, at the third degree or something, the Egoic Lotus moves up to the third, really the first subplane of the higher mental plane, and there goes through the final initiation, namely the fourth. But it doesn't seem to be the case from the other references. The destruction seems to occur upon the second subplane of the higher mental plane, and only the monastic permanent atom itself is found on the first subplane, and in a strange kind of way, the jewel in the lotus, the location of the jewel in the lotus is said to be between the highest mental subplane and the Buddhic plane. Whatever that means, well, we'll have to make that clearer, if we can, as we go along. Here particularly is the reference I was speaking about. The jewel in the lotus is situated between Manas and Buddhi, whilst the third eye is found between the right and left eyes. That's a very interesting statement, and I wonder if there's anything about subplanes particularly there. Well, let's see, that is, okay. These, I suppose, are too small for you to see. Okay, well, I think that's probably enough between Atman and Buddhi. So it seems to suggest between those two planes, whatever that interim ground might be. Is it on either one of the planes, or is it on a special level of vibration which we don't understand as belonging to either one of the planes? Anyway, there are all these references, and I think we've been given enough with this to understand something, I think. Okay. So let's go on. Right. So this is this statement is one we have to carefully attend. So usually it is conceived that the causal body is located only on subplanes 3 and 2 of the higher mental plane, but here the unfoldment of the petals seems to occur on all three subplanes. This is problematic. It would only have to do with the sacrifice petals, if any. It's hard to imagine when this would occur, as there is reason to believe that so-called so advanced initiation as the fourth is actually taken with the causal body still upon the second subplane. And maybe the following will make this clear. Yes, it looks like the reference that is needed here. The causal body of the average man is on the third subplane, and as a man becomes fit for the merging into the triad, that causal body has to be discarded and done away with. So under the law of sacrifice and death, the disintegration is begun on the third level and is consummated on the second, when the man merges with the triad. Now that's the destruction of the causal body, right? Preparatory to the final merging with the monad. That is so important. The second level, second subplane, then a merging with the triad, and final merging with the monad. It's all sequential in that sense. So we may recall a question posed a little earlier in the commentary: might the synthesis petals of the Egoic Lotus and the jewel in the lotus be, quote, located on the highest mental subplane, regardless of where the rest of the causal body was focused? Well, maybe. This may not seem as strange as it seems when we think of the fact that the chakras in the human etheric system are located on different etheric subplanes. You know, we learn that when we, where are we here? Yes, take a look here. The chakras are located on different etheric subplanes. 4 of them, in fact, with the lower chakras on the 4th subplane and the higher, respectively, throat, heart, and head on the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. So, okay? So it may not seem so far-fetched. 4 chakras on the lowest ether, the throat on the superetheric, heart chakra on the subatomic, head chakra on the atomic level. That they are all a part of the same chakra system, and they all work simultaneously, even though expressing through different etheric levels. So it could be that there is a great centralization occurring on the 1st level with the jewel in the lotus there. I know we can't really draw that in our types of drawings, but we can imagine that that would be the case with the jewel in the lotus and the other petals located in a frequency higher, and yet the other petals still surrounding them in a frequency lower. It makes sense. So let's say, yes, the centrality of the jewel in the lotus need not be disrupted by the fact, by the assertion that it is located on the higher mental plane or between Manas and Buddhi, at whatever vibratory level that signifies. Analogously, various parts of the Egoic Lotus could be focused on different subplanes of the higher mental plane and nevertheless still be part of the same coherent, Egoic Lotus system. So, we are asking then, are all parts of the Egoic Lotus always focused together on the same subplane of the higher mental plane, or are there parts of the causal body, let's say the synthesis petals and the jewel in the lotus, for instance, which may be focused, for instance, on the highest of the subplanes of the mental plane, while the other parts, the knowledge petal, for instance, may perhaps be focused simultaneously on the lowest of the 3 subplanes. Then what does it mean to change polarization, or that the lotus moves to the 2nd subplane? What is it that moves to the 2nd subplane? So far, we've had the idea of a pretty coherent, non-divisible lotus, but the focus of the inner being moves up a plane. And so does that mean that the petals of knowledge also move up a plane? And can they in some way, well, this is a very important sentence, what we have had here, that in fact, unfolding its petals in groups of 3 upon 3 subplanes of the higher mental plane. Yes, it seems, and when you look at the picture of the Egoic Lotus, it does seem that one of the knowledge petals touches, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the higher subplane. Well, of course, that's just a representation. We don't know. And one of the love petals touches the higher subplane. So perhaps this is simply a question of frequencies, but we do know from what has been said that the lotus as a whole, whatever that means, it seems to be focused on the 3rd level. So the causal body of the average man is on the 3rd subplane. And it sounds like the causal body of the one for whom the absorption into the triad is occurring is focused on the 2nd. I'll just make that bigger. We're dealing with frequencies and how frequencies affect disposition in space. So it's not an easy question. Okay, let's see here. So their unfoldment, that is the unfoldment of petals, is worked out through the evolutionary process, undergone on the 3 planes, lower planes, right, in the 3 worlds, or within the three halls of ignorance, of learning, and of wisdom. So on the three planes, i.e. the lower planes, right? Let's get that right. And thus in three halls of wisdom. So this is a very gradual unfoldment. When you consider that the causal body, at least in some methods of individualization, can be taking shape long before the moment of individualization. So we might say that the hall of ignorance is associated with the tier of knowledge petals, of course, the hall of learning with the love petals, and the hall of wisdom with the sacrifice petals. And there would be some degree of overlap. Nor is experience within the hall of wisdom consummated when the 9 petals are unfolded, because there's a lot more wisdom to be gathered after the third initiation. We might say the master is still very much in the hall of wisdom, and the master has dropped or translated the energy of the causal body, elevated it somehow into its petals, the energy of the causal body and its petals into the triadal level. So the following material will be linked with that found from Cosmic Fire 820 to 823. That's the second big reference section. And if we take them together, we'll have a lot of information on the meaning of the petals in the Egoic Lotus and their process of unfoldment. So we will now go into the meat of the matter really. And I wonder, perhaps I've been so inattentive to the time that these are taking that I think it might be a good place to break. Because now we're actually taking the petals up bit by bit, one at a time, tier at a time, and we've done about 1/4 of this particular document. So it's probably going to be about a 12, 13, 14-hour document presentation. I realize we've been into some very abstract material that requires a lot of pondering, because somehow the different levels, systemic, maybe even cosmic, have been connected to the question of the human egoic lotus. But now we're going to take up a more concrete version of this same thing. We're going to look at each petal, petal by petal, and this will be material that can be drawn together when we examine the synthesis of these, really petal by petal. Now I'm taking what DK has to say. But there are other things to be brought together when we do this. So I'm thinking that in spite of the fact that it's a bit of an ungainly moment, I'm thinking that we should say that this is the end of Egoic Lotus webinar commentary program 21. It's, well, by the time I finish with this, let's say it'll be 3 hours and 20 minutes about. 3 hours, 20 minutes. Not sure how to make that fit into any conventional time slot. And we have dealt with TCF 536 to 539, I believe. Let's see where we are. Oh, maybe the best way to do it is to go over here. Yes, I think so. And we're in, yes, we're in we're in page 539. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll put that down, and then we'll be able to orient, and we'll be able to continue with our next work. 539, correct, and we'll say beginning with Egoic Lotus webinar commentary program 22. How many minutes we don't know, but it'll be beginning with TCF at 5:39. Was it really necessary to go through these first 3 pages, which have been so complicated in a certain way? Well, let's just say there's much to ponder here, and every one of those sections that we kind of went through rather briefly could take hours of thinking together. So let's call it at this moment, and we will continue shortly. All right, friends, here we go. We'll see you for program number 22. Right? Okay, we'll see you then.